In many ways, life has changed little over thousands of years. We still conduct our daily rituals and walk among buildings whose faces reflect the past. We still wake up, we eat, drink, we go to work. And we still ask ourselves that timeless question: why am I here? But what we tend to hear back is that we have lost our connection to the nature of things. Just like the mystery of life, the journey you're about to take is also timeless. An initiation into ancient systems of knowledge once used by high priests, shamans, and pharaohs in their sanctuaries. And that knowledge can be applied in our sanctuaries today. Temples come in all shapes and forms. Tall, small, hidden, unobtrusive, subtle, and overt. But they all share one common characteristic. Every one is a sacred space of subtle, living energy, created using identical principles that have no expiry date. In this program, we will discover the principles that harness subtle energies and create portals of possibility in our own daily lives. And in doing so, we shall increase the potential to live our lives as co-creators. There's one important characteristic that differentiates us from our predecessors. Those who came before possessed a greater understanding of the forces that shape our world. They discovered that everything that works in life is based on a sympathetic relationship with universal laws. In addition to measuring the cycle of seasons and the movement of stars, their prime motivation was the creation of a closer bond with the unseen universe. They reasoned that by transposing specific cosmic principles on Earth, they could ride a wave of energy that connected them to the heart of everything. The Egyptians called it, as above, so below. This spiritual technology opened doorways to other levels of reality, offering them greater understanding of the environment, as well as control of their lives. And so they embarked on a colossal building program, setting up antennas around the world to communicate with the invisible universe. wherever these were placed, balance was restored to the land. And people who interacted with these sanctuaries became atoned, that is, at one with the visible and the invisible. Consequently, ancient cultures functioned with greater stability, because they were working with, rather than against, the subtle machinery of nature. With these temples, they created portals of power across the face of the earth, and their perseverance is our legacy. Rediscovering and applying their principles in our modern life has become more urgent than ever. Increasingly divorced from the natural world, we struggle to find answers to why our lives seem so rudderless. Indeed, our generation is shrouded in a kind of spiritual deficit disorder, a lack of connection with natural forces, the very forces that exist for our guidance and ultimately for our survival. We must rediscover the lost art of temple making to create sanctuaries where we and the universe can engage in intimate dialogue. Our very own places of illumination, communication, and transformation. But what exactly makes sacred space different from profane space? Our ancestors understood that life is based on the principle of harmonic resonance. It is a view now shared by the enlightened scientific community. This cosmic rhythm and balance binds all atoms and molecules. It underlies all that exists. Such a concept is enshrined in the esoteric branch of Islam, which sees the primary creative source not as a human form or icon, but as orderly geometric relationships. In fact, they describe these geometric patterns as the image of God at rest. Our predecessors also understood that all living organisms generate a resonance, and the vitality of every organism depends on the level of connection between its resonance and that of its local environment. Thus, if a sympathetic resonance exists between the two, then a bond is established and information is exchanged. In the field of human affairs, we refer to this as falling in love. But since we tend to live in a state of duality here on Earth, we invent a separation between physical and non-physical. The human ego, plus an over-association with the material world, inevitably leads to a disconnection with the forces we do not see, which paradoxically are integral to our lives. And so we become diseased with our environment. Scientifically speaking, the resonance between our molecules and our environment becomes unbalanced. Our inner geometry enters a state of chaos. It can be said that we go from being well to being in hell. And it's a fine line between the two. In such an unbalanced environment, we short-circuit our natural ability to connect and work with the subtle forces around us. Through the ages, these forces have been described as angels, fairies, spirit, even God. But regardless of how we describe it, in such a state of separation, we lessen our ability to manifest what we require and achieve our purpose in this life. Such concepts formed the basis of esoteric studies taught in ancient mystery schools, particularly those of Egypt. Their principles were deemed so important to the purposeful conduct of life that they were zealously guarded by later esoteric traditions, such as the Cathars, the Knights Templars, Bogomils, and early Freemasons, who defended them at enormous personal cost. The goal of these esoteric orders was one and the same: re-establish a sympathetic resonance with cosmic forces and harness all aspects of energy and conscious manifestation. In other words, be a co-creator. This goal was accomplished by applying specific principles that generated a resonant environment with which one was able to interact. One technique was to apply natural harmonics in the arrangement of elements within the temple. Another was to use the energy of water. Even lines of magnetic force were moved to the site. Stones and crystals were specifically chosen to anchor these streams of energy and to amplify the intent of each temple. Certain parts of the temple were designed to awaken the principal energy meridians of the human body. This enabled a person's energy field to be opened slowly, allowing finer, more penetrating frequencies to influence the body. As you can see, to regard these oracles as mere places of worship is to do an injustice to the genius of the temple builders. Clearly, these monuments were meant for something other than worship. In fact, their ancient Semitic name is Beth Arod, meaning a house of work. Therefore, these temples were not used for worship, but workship. They were workshops, places of initiation into the sacred arts. In parts of the Iberian Peninsula, they are called Betilu, meaning a house of God. Yet it stretches the imagination to see these as houses. In the spirit of the purpose for which they were built, the name implies a place of connecting with the source of creation. Some of these houses are over 8,000 years old. The wisdom keepers at these temples were masters of the craft. By 1300 BC, their main center was in the Egyptian city of On, today reduced to a solitary obelisk amid noisy Cairo. The roots of the craft of the Freemasons are found here. Such wisdom keepers were described as cunning, a word stemming from the Old English kyning, meaning knowing special esoteric knowledge. So next time someone calls you a cunning person, be sure to thank them. Their interdimensional doorways were built to last, an insurance policy for a time when we as a society would lose our connection to the unseen and over-associate with the material world. And that time is now. Some portals have been in continuous use for thousands of years. Like Glastonbury, they remain places of pilgrimage, as though people still understand and resonate with their underlying purpose, consciously or otherwise. Because sacred sites were strategically positioned to take advantage of the subtle forces inherent in the land, many would later become seats of centralized power, as the predominant experience of humanity swung from cooperation and unity to control and fear. The Tower of London is one such example. Strategically placed on an ancient mound by William the Conqueror, one of the last kings to understand the principles of manipulating portals of energy. By imposing his intent on this portal, he was able to subjugate an entire nation. Originally named for the Egyptian goddess Isis, Paris is an excellent example of temple making on a grand scale. The city is fashioned on the ground plan of the temples of Luxor and Karnak, and upon visiting, there's no doubt that an air of connectivity with higher principles permeates this city of romance. Like Paris, Washington, D.C. was originally planned by Freemasonic orders who applied the principles of sacred geometry. The intent was to create a universal city that nurtured the noblest principles of humanity. So obviously this technology can be used and abused. After all, energy is simply energy, and human intent, being one of the most powerful creative energies, can choose to use it for wrong action or for right action. To remind us just how far we have misplaced our connection to the sacred, 11,000 crop circles have mysteriously appeared beside ancient sacred sites in 29 countries. This phenomenon has been appearing for over 100 years. In South Africa, they are referred to as the Great Circles of the Gods. Perhaps the spirits of our ancestors are sending a message, because the same principles once employed to create their temples are now found encoded in these enigmatic symbols. Because the principles of sacred space work as well as they did 8,000 years ago, they can easily be applied today in our modern environments to enhance our well-being and that of the Earth. By applying the 7 principles of sacred space, you will be able to create an environment of subtle energies that enable you to connect and communicate more effectively with invisible forces. Such a sacred space can be used for receiving information or guidance. To create a temple that amplifies your energy and multiplies the potential of your own power, thereby aiding your own conscious manifestation process. To establish an environment that heals and rejuvenates the body and the mind. For the more ambitious, the principles of sacred space can be applied on a grand scale. Groups of like-minded people can create temples to facilitate the forces of light across a large tract of land, even an entire city. Or simply to create a sanctuary in a room, a workspace, or a garden where one can be at ease with the world. Many formal European gardens were designed with principles taught in this program, so it is not surprising how they still attract millions of visitors. Temples can be very simple. They can be part of the landscape. They can be functional, yet unobtrusive. Some of the principles at work in Stonehenge are discreetly employed in this small urban apartment. Later in this program, we shall discover how. All temples are built on a foundation of principles that are analogous to their host environment, in this case, the planet Earth. And the more processes are applied, the greater the connection between you, your environment, and all levels of reality. So let us now look at each of the 7 principles of sacred space. Now, let's begin to construct our very own portal of possibility by selecting a desired location and examining the first principle. Water covers 2/3 the body of the planet. And coincidentally, this mysterious element makes up 2/3 of the human body. This makes water a fundamental ingredient in temples because it mirrors those who benefit the most from their use. That water interacts with the forces shaping the universe is demonstrated by the way an object traveling through it creates a wake of approximately 19.47 degrees. This is the same angle at which energy rises from the core of a planet and manifests on the surface as the most active spot. On Earth, this is evidenced by the Hawaiian volcanoes, which sit at 19.47 degrees of latitude. The same concept is found on other planets throughout the solar system. When water interacts with humans, interesting things occur. Being 2/3 water, the human body and its electromagnetic field, plus the resonance of its intent, make for a powerful combination. As observed during rain ceremonies conducted by shamans in New Mexico and the Middle East, water reacts to such a formula. In laboratory experiments, this interaction is both measurable and dramatic. Here, the crystalline structure of tap water shows a significant difference before and after contact with the photo of an affectionate child. In another experiment using identical waters, the phrases "I love you" and "I will kill you" were written on separate bottles with focused intent. The comparative results reveal the effect of such contrasting energies and demonstrates the power and influence of human intent on matter. Hardly surprising, therefore, that all temples are sited above or beside water. Even in places where it is not immediately obvious, such as in the deserts of Egypt and Arizona, where veins of water are at work beneath the temples, generating a subtle electromagnetic field. The tradition of honoring water at sacred sites continues today through the use of holy wells and fonts of water in all their churches. Such water possesses greater properties of spin and absorbs light to a greater degree than ordinary water. Such potentized liquid makes an excellent conductor of energy. So the first element in temple making is to vector veins of underground water to the location where you wish to build your temple. This procedure applies regardless if your temple is on the ground or 50 stories above it. To achieve this, we used the law of attraction. We focus our attention and then apply our intention. Focusing your attention allows your atoms to consciously connect with the atoms of the object in mind, in this case water, and the recognition takes place between the two. Your intention gives energy to this connection so that action can take place. Send your attention out to all streams of natural water below the soil around you. Now, use your intention to draw that water to the location of your temple. Reinforce it by visualizing the water trickling like ribbons through the soil and towards the temple. And as you hold this image, say out loud, "By my conscious intent, I ask that natural streams of water be drawn to this location, for the purpose of creating a temple of light, for the highest good of the local spirit, and for the highest good of all." You can choose your own words, but be very, very specific in your request. It is done. The conviction of your intent, together with the belief and acceptance that you have stirred a conscious act into motion, are key to the success of this or any operation. Water will start to trickle to the location instantly. And since water has to travel around physical objects such as rocks and soil, the process will continue to build and settle over the course of several days. Trust the process. Belief and acceptance in your ability as a co-creator are key to the success of this endeavor. The second principle of temple making is magnetism. To ancient eyes, and indeed to anyone with a developed sense of intuition, the landscape we inhabit looks a little different. It is full of eddies and spirals of energy. In southern Britain, the conical mound of Silbury Hill marks and accentuates one such spiraling motion of energy. It seems that form follows function. But there is another form that moves through the land. Pathways of magnetic energy. The ancients called them spirit roads, serpent lines, and dragons. Throughout Celtic lands they are still called fairy paths, and heaven help you if you block their flow with a gate or a wall, because doing so interrupts the flow of living energy to the land and all who live there. They curve through valleys, mountaintops, woods and streams, houses and villages. Like an electric circuit, the magnetic lines are positively or negatively charged, or to put it another way, they are masculine or feminine in polarity. Since they are magnetic, they enable the sending and receiving of information between points, including planets, perhaps even further. In a way, they behave like interstellar conveyor belts. Balls of light or structured craft are often seen along these pathways, and so they are used for traveling, in the wider sense of the word. Not surprisingly, all temples, without exception, are situated at the crossroads of these invisible paths of magnetic energy. Across southern Britain, there exists an alignment of ancient temples, standing stones, Celtic Christian churches, Gothic cathedrals, and other sacred sites, and all of them are found along two major tributaries of this energy. Some even mark the exact position of the serpent and its energy node. What is curious is that all of them are dedicated to a deity that reflects the gender of the magnetic path upon which they stand. In the case of churches, those built on the male path are dedicated to the Archangel Michael, or his modern counterpart, St. George. Those on the female path are dedicated to Mary, or her mother, Anne. Thus, these two magnetic lines became known as the Michael and Mary lines. Many of the newer temples also stand on top of older Neolithic or Druid sites. An identical situation exists across much of Europe. The head of the dragon begins its journey on a lonely island in the Atlantic Ocean, appropriately named Skellig Michael, atop of which there are Celtic and Neolithic chapels. Its tale concludes at the plain of Megiddo in Israel, better known today as Armageddon. Clearly, there is an implied warning in this coincidence. Incorrect use of these pathways of energy could have disastrous consequences for the world. Why is this magnetic energy so important in temple making? The answer lies in the effects of magnetism on the human body. There exist substantial deposits of magnetite in the human brain. Small changes in the local magnetic field can alter its state of perception. Magnetism can also vibrate the pineal gland, causing a chemical reaction in the brain which leads to altered states of awareness. In this state, a person is more capable of perceiving information from more subtle levels of reality. This concept is symbolized by the raised cobra placed on a pharaoh's brow, the location of the third eye chakra. The raised cobra not only mimics the raised pineal, but since it no longer slides along the ground, it shows that the pharaoh no longer identifies his existence purely with material forces. Like the vulture beside it, he now flies above his incarnate body, raised toward the sky, and spiritualized. Magnetism also stimulates the human body by influencing the particles of iron contained in blood. Like water, incorporating the snaking magnetic paths in the temple is both practical and empowering. eating the fruits of this wisdom allows you to work with natural energy and connect with spirit. And since this process does not require a middleman, it once drove the Roman Catholic Church to concoct the association between the serpent and evil. In sacred sites, magnetism and water are intertwined, because magnetism is attracted to water. Since we have already moved water to the site of our proposed temple, the process of attracting a magnetic line is made that much simpler. Let us apply the law of attraction. Send out your attention to all magnetic lines. Imagine these as ribbons flowing along the land. Now, use your intention to draw in all appropriate magnetic lines. Reinforce this by visualizing them moving toward your temple. And as you hold this image, say out loud, "By my conscious intent, I ask that the Earth's lines of magnetic energy be drawn to this location for the purpose of creating a temple of light, for the highest good of the local spirit, and for the highest good of all." Again, you can choose your own words, but be very, very specific in your request. Assuming the request is appropriate, one or more magnetic lines are vectored instantaneously. You should find that the change in the local landscape is both immediate and measurable through dowsing. Those who are more sensitive will feel a rise in temperature or a tingle in the lower arms. Some may even feel off balance, as if pushed aside by an invisible hand. Now that we have attracted two essential elements to our temple in progress, we can begin to define the exact space of the temple. The third principle of temple making is sacred measure. Because a portal is essentially a microcosm of all universal forces at work in one place, applying a unit of measure that is derived from the very particles on which matter is based will generate another level of resonance with cosmic forces. So, as you might guess, the temple builders didn't settle for some ordinary unit of measure when it came to constructing their buildings. To understand how they arrived at creating the perfect unit of measure for temples, let's take a look at how the universe is constructed. The primary building blocks of matter are the sphere and the tetrahedron. They are the glue of the universe. When a tetrahedron is circumscribed within a sphere, the surface areas of these two geometric solids are in proportion to each other by a ratio of 2.72. This pairing of the sphere and the tetrahedron is seen on Earth as the most essential chemical substance to all life: water. Water is made up from the bond of hydrogen and oxygen molecules, and the distance between these molecules measures precisely 2.72 angstroms. This numerical ratio, 2.72, is also found in the values representing the sun and the moon, without which life on Earth would be slightly difficult. The solar year consists of 365.242 days. By comparison, the lunar year is just 354.367 days. The difference between the two is 10.875 days. If you divide this number by the full lunar month of 29.53 days, you get 2.7154, reduced to 2 decimal places as 2.72. It seems then that this numerical value, 2.72, exists at many levels of reality. It can be said to be a transdimensional constant. It stands to reason that a unit of measure derived from such relationships not only establishes a connection to the elements that make up the universe, it also creates a bond with the earth itself. And the megalithic temple builders employed such a unit. It is called the megalithic yard, and it is precisely 2.72 feet. The megalithic yard was the system of measure employed in ancient temples, particularly the stone circles of the Celtic world. Let us now return to the place that we have designated as our future temple. If you will recall, we have already vectored lines of magnetic energy and also veins of underground water to the area. Let us now apply the megalithic yard as the physical foundation of our modern-day temple. For the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to create a simple circular temple. We begin by measuring a radius of 3 megalithic yards. That's 3 units of 2.72 feet. Obviously, it is not easy to accurately measure in units of 2.72 feet, even though it translates roughly to 33 inches. But we wish to be as precise as possible, so this is where intent helps. Measure out the radius of your temple as accurately as you can. Then, using your intent, focus on the precise number you are trying to physically measure. This compensates for any discrepancy in the physical. How can this be so? Well, your intent is electromagnetic, therefore its resonance is superphysical. In other words, the vibration of intent supersedes anything that exists in gross physical form. The success of the outcome is amplified by the power of your belief. And the more you believe, the more your thought is given form in reality. That is the power of human intent. Using the megalithic yard as the foundation of our temple means that from now on, any structure we create within this space will be influenced by the harmonics of this measure, as well as its connection to universal forces. Now that we have defined a specific area for a temple, we must direct those water and magnetic lines already in the general vicinity into our portal in progress. And that brings us to the 4th principle of temple making. Because of their nature, magnetic lines are influenced by terrestrial and solar events, and so they constantly meander about the land like serpents, hence their traditional association with things that slither. So in ancient times, if you wanted to facilitate a meeting place for cosmic and terrestrial forces, it became necessary to route this energy to the spot. In essence, you'd be performing a kind of earth acupuncture. And the way it was done was by programming stone. And not just any kind of stone, mind you. When you examine sacred sites, including churches and cathedrals, it is obvious that specific types of stones were used for specific purposes. Clearly this was by design, because some of them were transported from as much as 400 miles away. Stone used in temples has a high content of quartz. In fact, the type of quartz in the blue stones of Stonehenge is also found in early radios. Quartz is a piezoelectric material. Therefore, just like a modern-day computer, it possesses energetic properties, and it can be programmed. And throughout the temple-making world, the programming was done through intent. There are 3 genders of temple: male, female, and balanced. And each gender is reflected in the choice of stone. Masculine energy was symbolized by the force of the sun, and this force was mirrored on Earth in rock created through volcanic action. So, when creating a temple that favors male energy, always use stone of volcanic origin. Granites, basalt, dolerite, greenstone, or serpentine. Red granite is particularly favored because it has a very high content of quartz, as well as iron, the ingredient found in human blood. Carefully applied, it can have a significant effect on a person, hence why it was the stone of choice in the core of pyramids, and later as the foundation stone of altars in churches. And that is precisely why they are called altars. By contrast, the force of the moon was considered female. This is because of the moon's effect on tides and fertility cycles, as well as the light of the moon being a reflection of the light from the masculine sun. This lunar force is therefore mirrored in stone born of the action of water. And so, stone of sedimentary origin is the preferred choice in temples that work with feminine energy. And these are limestone, sandstone, sarsen, which is a highly compressed sandstone, marble, alabaster, and finally schist, which is not sedimentary in origin but metamorphic. Yet since it is formed by the action of water and the compression of material over time, it too is also considered a feminine stone. There is one point of departure that only occurs in male temples, and that is that all male temples include one female element in order to work. This is because purely male energy cannot create motion all by itself. An example of this is how the poles of two magnets will join together when aligned female to female and male to female, but will repel when placed male to male. Solar temples, such as the altar room at Edfu in Egypt, contain the male red granite surrounded by the female sandstone. The amount of female stone is not important, so long as one element is present. Greek temples dedicated to Athena or Diana are an excellent example of lunar female temples, and they use marble on marble. Some temples vector a combination of male and female energy. These are places originally designed for balance, and the intent is reflected in the mix of granites and limestones and sandstones. Stonehenge, which is a lunar as well as a solar temple, uses female sarsen stones, and bluestone, a high-density granite with unusual acoustic properties, quarried far away in Wales. Because of the changes in society and styles, it may not be convenient, even visually alluring, to deposit stones in your home, particularly in a modern urban setting where space is limited. So for those of us who live in apartments, there is a solution. Substitute stones for crystals. Although they are inherent in the stone, crystals were never specifically used in the structure of temples because of their unsuitability as building material. And yet crystals possess similar energetic characteristics to stone. The prime neutral crystal is clear quartz. It is a pure androgynous element, and therefore it can be programmed to swing either way. The energy polarity of crystals is reflected in the energetic qualities of their names. Words are, after all, mental interpretations of underlying causes and effects. Therefore, a name with an imposing or dominant tone, such as ruby or agate, describes a male energy. On the other hand, emerald or lapis lazuli evokes a flowing energy, just like water, and such crystals are considered female. If you wish to construct a temple of balanced energy, simply mix the two types of crystal, just as you would using stone. Or you can use labradorite, which is one of the few gems that incorporates both elements of the sacred masculine and the feminine. So let's return to the area we have already defined for our temple. At this moment, we place male and female stones to physically mark the circumference of the area we had measured using the megalithic yard. Placing the stones by themselves doesn't create anything, because at this point they are simply lumps of solidified energy. But the moment we send them attention and we give them intention, that's when magic begins to happen. So, send your attention to every stone around the perimeter. Hold their shape in your mind, their weight, their texture. And as you hold these images, consciously send out your intent to these stones and say to yourself, by my conscious intent, I ask these stones to anchor the veins of water and the lines of magnetic energy to this designated space, for the purpose of creating a temple of light, for the highest good of the local spirit, and for the highest good of all. It is done. You will find that where the width of the magnetic lines previously encompassed the general area of this temple in progress, these same lines have now been attracted to the stones which carry your intent. The energy field is now glued to the exact perimeter of the area you have intended. At this point, those who are more sensitive will notice that a subtle energy field has also begun to build around the perimeter. It resembles a series of ripples that radiate away from the perimeter, as if the temple is a rock that has suddenly been thrown into a pool of energy. Magnetic energy is not only concentrating around the perimeter of the temple, it has also begun to spin inside it, creating a slow-motion vortex which will build as we progress. So let us recap what we have accomplished so far. We have discovered the law of attraction and how it can be used to move and influence energy. We located a suitable piece of land where we wish to build a portal of energy. Then we applied the power of our attention and intention to draw the veins of underground water to this area. We repeated the process to vector the lines of magnetic energy. Next, we defined the area of the temple by using the megalithic yard as the unit of measure. Finally, we physically defined the temple by placing male and female stones around the circumference. And when we gave those stones attention and intention, the wandering lines of water and magnetism were drawn to that exact area. So in a short space of time, we have begun to create a portal of energy on the land. Next, we must give that energy purpose, and for that we must apply sacred geometry to the positioning of the stones, which brings us to the fifth principle of temple making.